a decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsberg, and your host, Drew Mandel. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Sorry, guys, we're going to just be delayed a little bit here to start. I'm reading about Robin Lehner of the Vegas Golden Knights filing for bankruptcy, and then also the fact that he apparently owns an exotic snake farm as part of his bankruptcy filing. So, if you ever want to get into the exotic snake business, apparently Robin Lehner is your man to do that. So there's the breaking news of the morning here in the NHL world.
That's
Robin
a lot
Lehner.
to unpack there, boys. Like,
well, it gets better, Ezzy. The guy that hang on, let me just make sure I'm reading this accurately. The guy that Robin Lehner bought the exotic snakes from was subsequently murdered by his wife and sentenced to 16 years in prison.
How could he be sentenced to 16 years in prison if he was murdered by his wife?
The wife was thank you, David. There was the dangling modifier there, or a misplaced modifier, but whatever it was, the wife was sentenced to 16 years in prison.
Did she feed him to the snakes?
It does not appear as though she fed him to the snakes, but at some point in time, the snakes lost value because the snakes began breeding amongst one another in an unsupervised, uncontrolled manner, causing the collection of snakes to lose value.
That's murderer worthy.
I'll tell you one thing. I hate snakes. Of all the things sort of in the world, snakes are up there in terms of things that I just have no time for.
Drew, the snakes in Manitoba are usually just garter snakes. Like, you don't have to be that worried about. No, I'm joking.
The Manitoba ones are fire. Look, that's why I like living in Manitoba. I'm not worried about a collection of snakes coming to.
Do you like Jake the Snake, Drew?
What
about Damien?
I don't really have. I've never met either of them, so I really have no way of saying one way or the other. There is the story about.
Well, and as an aside, I have to say, just to pay a note to our friends at Betway, if you could have bet $1 million that Ezzy, Drew, or Dave, who was going to completely just derail the show 1 second into said show, it's 0% chance that any of the folks, including Ezzy and I, would have put a nickel on Drew being the one to derail the show a minute in, not even do his famous intro. So
we'll get to the famous intro, but the real fault lies with both Alan and Bailey, because I knew nothing about that. I was ignorant about Robin Lehner.
You were reading the chat
farm, but I was reading the chat.
I'm pretty sure that this is new. Like, I don't think a lot of people knew that about Robin Lehner, right? This
article was just published yesterday on sinbin.vegas, which they cover the Golden Knights.
We know the Sinbin folks.
Yeah, we know the Sinbin folks. So they just published this article, looks like yesterday, and I hadn't seen it. And then Bailey and Alan were talking about it in the chat, and now I'm down the rabbit hole of exotic snake farming.
Down the snake hole, Drew, not the rabbit hole.
That's true. I'm down the snake hole, I guess. Snake pit. I guess snakes live in holes.
Snake dens.
There you go. You would know it, Dave. You always go and check out the garden.
Only Slash gets the snake pit.
I go to Narcisse. Yeah, it's first of all, even if you don't like snakes, it's a great walk. But it's pretty cool to see one of these Manitoba phenomenons. So I hadn't gone before. About 5 or 6 years ago. Took my grandparents. They had never been. They've lived here for 70 years. They'd never been to Narcisse. So definitely we're checking out. It's an easy walk around, and there's some very cool snake species in Manitoba. I'm not going to get into it, but if you ever want to check them out, whatchamacallit, Spirit Sands has one of some variety of rattlesnake, non-poisonous or very mild, and garter snakes.
Oh, and then just before to wrap up the snake discussion, because Lord knows this show goes off the rails very quickly, and this is my fault. When my daughter was, how old would have Aaron been? Maybe about 2. We were in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and Hilton Head, South Carolina has a wide collection of snakes and alligators and exotic animals that we don't typically have here in Winnipeg. And so we were out for a walk, my wife and I and our daughter and my in-laws, and the grandfather clock was not there, just for the record. We didn't bring the grandfather clock with us, but we're walking through this wildlife refuge, and Laura and I are up ahead, and then Aaron stops to look at something, and we don't really pay much mind to it. and then my in-laws are following up behind her. And it's only when my mother-in-law gets close to Erin that she realizes that Erin is standing and pointing at a snake that's got its fangs out, not really enjoying the company from my daughter. So parents of the year right over here, folks. That's what I'm saying. We put the Ginsburgs to shame every now and then. Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. And for all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we welcome you to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show with Dave Manouk, with Ezra Ginsburg. I'm your host, Drew Mandel. You never know the tangent.
David Attenborough is going to be joining us in about 25 minutes, boys.
In any event, we say good morning to you all. Good morning to the chat. Good morning to everybody joining us on our YouTube channel and all the social media platforms to talk about the Winnipeg Jets. We promise it'll be mostly Jets oriented from here on out. Not going to go back into the snake conversation too much.
That's awful that he had to file for bankruptcy. Like Robin Lehner, of course, has not played this year at all for the Golden Knights. So it's like the snake thing is one thing, but you never like to see a person, any person,
no, of course,
in their early 30s that's filing for bankruptcy. So obviously he got into some trouble with his snakes or other things, right? So I mean, we know Robin Lehner, look, he's been very courageous, right, with his battles with addiction and mental health and everything like that. So on a serious note, I do hope that, things turn around for Robin Lehner and his family, because you just never like to see that.
No, you don't. You're right.
And for the record, I want everyone who's listening to the podcast, they're going to thank me when I cut out the first 5 minutes of nonsense and just go when Drew launches into his good morning. They're not going to understand the snake references once or twice, so they can come back and watch the replay. But don't worry, folks. If you're listening to this on podcast, I've cut out Drew's 5 minutes of bizarreness.
I think that the bizarreness is half the reason why people are listening to this show.
Okay, fine, I'll leave it in.
You got to leave this in. This was good quality bizarreness. This came way out of left field. This is not our typical nonsense.
Let's not forget, Drew, that the original title of the show was the Illegal Curve Freak Show.
That's true, exactly. We just have to transition a little bit to hockey, but you never know where you're going to go on this program. Let's get into the Winnipeg Jets. Of course, a great performance by the Jets last night in Pittsburgh, as we talked about on the Illegal Curve post-game show last night. An absolute complete effort, a dominant effort, top to bottom by the Winnipeg Jets on the second half of a back-to-back situation. They go into Pittsburgh, a place where they traditionally have not had a lot of success, and they absolutely take it to the hometown Penguins, ending the road trip with that 2-1 record, and as a result, moving into a tie atop the Central Division with the Dallas Stars. I don't know if you guys saw our buddy Ken Weeb. Kenny was on Hockey Night in Canada last night, did a great job talking to Ron and Elliot, and they were talking about the upcoming trade deadline, because that's really where the focus of everything is. And Kevin Cheveldayoff, of course, met with the assembled media who were on the road trip to talk about the trade deadline, and to really save everyone about 25 or 30 minutes of listening. What Cheveldayoff said, that the key takeaway,
for the record, it's not actually not available for listening. It wasn't recorded.
Okay, well,
other than by the assembled media, so it wasn't actually the Jets didn't post it or anything like that,
which is unusual. You think the Jets might post it, but whatever.
Guys, I'll steal Mike McIntyre's tape recorder.
Well, didn't you steal his cell phone? I think if we just steal his cell phone, which he lost on the road trip at least once or twice, then we can get the audio from it. But nonetheless, the Jets are atop the Central Division, and Kevin Cheveldayoff was speaking about, when you have an opportunity, you need to go for it. And right now, I think it's clear from everybody who looks around the Western Conference, there's no reason why the Jets don't have that opportunity. There's no reason why they can't be, one of the favorites for the Western Conference. They're a point behind the Vegas Golden Knights in terms of the best teams in the Western Conference. When you think about the best teams, you have to talk about the Jets. You have to talk about the Stars. You talk about the Golden Knights. I mean, the Los Angeles Kings are ahead of the Seattle Kraken, but the Kraken have 4 games in hand. The way the Kraken are playing,
the Western Conference is completely wide open.
Right, they're completely wide open. It's a crapshoot for the Western Conference. It's going to be get into the tournament, and then you're going to have a pretty good chance, because right now I think anybody could beat anybody else for the most part. For the most part, being the operative words there. So let me ask you guys this: if you're upgrading one position on the Winnipeg Jets between now and the trade deadline, or you're doing one big acquisition, what are you targeting? Are you targeting the back end? Are you targeting a top 6, top 9 winger? Are you targeting somebody up the middle where it seems like the Jets actually have a fair bit of strength up the middle? If you are Kevin Cheveldayoff and you are saying this is the one position we need to shore up, what is that position for you, Ezzy?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I mentioned this earlier this week. I think it was after the Jets Red Wings game. Some people I see in the chat are talking about Ryan O'Reilly or Jonathan Taves, a couple guys that have some Stanley Cups between them. That would be great. I still think for me, it's a shutdown defenseman. Like I know that the Jets have come a long way since last year. Like any advanced statistic has been better for the Jets when it comes to team defense. But I still think, that's what I would like to see. And I think you saw it a little bit on display against the Oilers and the Flames back a week ago. And you saw it a little bit on this road trip, not a little bit. You saw it against Detroit and Buffalo that, the Jets have struggled at times with skilled teams, right? So for me, it's a shutdown defenseman. And, I don't know what that trade is going to look like. Not sure if you guys or, anybody watching right now or listening to the podcast saw, what the San Jose Sharks are reportedly seeking for Erik Karlsson. Yeah. By the way, the fact that they're going to retain 18%, that was such a specific number.
It's high, Ezzy. It's high. They're retaining a high percentage.
Yeah.
High meaning life in Hebrew. And
I did think of that, Drew. Yeah. But it was just funny that, why not 15% or 20%? Like 18% is just a very specific number. I thought that was funny, but they're looking for multiple first-round picks.
3 first-round picks, and I think they'd say that 3 first-round picks may be a prospect as well, and they would retain 18%.
Right. So, and obviously, I'm not suggesting that the Jets are in on Erik Karlsson or, that Chevy has talked to Mike Greer about Erik Karlsson. That's not what I'm suggesting, but, you can just look at some of the defensemen that are available, and then, there would be a similar return. I don't think, Jacob Chychrun, for example, is going to require multiple first-round picks, but you're probably going to have to give up at least 1 first-round pick and then maybe a roster player and a prospect as well, right? So, we've talked about, some of the defensemen, like a guy like Matthias Ekholm. Nashville's still in the playoff race, but how long are they going to be in the playoff race? So, Ivan Provorov is another guy whose name is out there. He's not a prototypical shutdown defenseman, but he's obviously a guy that would, in theory, be a Jets top 4 defenseman, right? So that's kind of what I'm looking at, Dave. Like when I look at the Jets 2017-18 run, that group of defensemen is still deeper than, you guys remember Toby Enstrom was a healthy scratch the last game against the Golden Knights, right? So I'm just saying that for me, that is the
and
area.
He's never been seen. And he's never been seen. Since.
He didn't talk to the media for sure because he left in a huff. So I think I've suggested a guy like Sean Monahan. I think would be that type of player who could play center, could play wing, Dave, on the second or third line. So I think there's nothing wrong with bringing in an extra forward. I just don't know if it's going to be a top 6 forward because look at right now the Jets have won 7 of their last 8, and the top 6 is looking great. So I don't necessarily think. You need to bring in, like, for example, a Ryan O'Reilly or a Patrick Kane or somebody like that, right? Like, and you'd have to give up quite a bit and you'd have to figure out the salary cap. But for me, Dave, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And it's really tough to get inside Chevy's head. But I wouldn't be surprised if, prior to the trade deadline, the Jets bring in a top 4 defenseman and a top 9 forward.
So, Dave, same question to you. As he would lean towards the back end, prototypical shutdown defender on the back end. You sometimes have a different take than our good friend Ginsburg. What do you say is the Jets' priority for acquiring at the trade deadline?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because Mason Appleton wasn't burning out the house when he was, in the lineup. But you do wonder, would a Barron, Lowry, Appleton line be sufficient and give you what that third line has been providing somewhat, but again, inconsistently because Adam Lowry doesn't seem to have the same winger any single night, or he becomes a winger. But generally speaking, would you want, look, folks have been mentioning faceoffs and the Jets haven't, been great on faceoffs. So would you want to get someone who can help up the middle and provide a little bit of, be a bit of a faceoff specialist? Obviously they've got guys who can play the position, and guys with experience like a Sam Gagner and stuff like that. Dave Gustafson, obviously not so much. Kevin Stenlund, again, a little bit more limited. So would you want to augment things? Would you want to push Adam Lowry down to be your 4th line center? Obviously he would still play a lot. 4th line is kind of an arbitrary number, but to me, I would tend to target more and really it depends on price. Because you can't say, look, you have to go. If the Jets are going for it, which I understand, you still have to be somewhat understanding that you still have to think about your future, right? Because there's no guarantee you're going to win. So you can't just be like, okay, we're going to completely mortgage the future. I'm all for going for it. And I would say you could trade, a pick, you could trade your first rounder. I mean, I understand how deep it is. That's why I think the first rounder has so much value, right? Because even a late first rounder, which in theory the Jets would be giving up in 2023, is still a very, look what Tage Thompson was a 26 overall pick by the Blues. I mean, there's guys who are
What
late
about more recently, Dave? Brad Lambert for the Jets.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm saying like Tage Thompson, at least look, here's a guy who's going to score potentially 60 goals, and he was drafted late in the first round. I'm just saying there's always guys who can be taken late and become something in the NHL. So it's not just always not a top 10 pick. Doesn't have value. And in a draft like this, which again, it kind of goes back to the McDavid, Eichel, that sort of thing, as when everybody was so focused on the draft and they talked about how deep it was. That's what these scouts have been doing for, it feels like, years now with the 2023 draft. So I just think that the capital, I mean, that's why I think like the Sharks asked for Carlson. I think one of the people in the chat said, and they're not wrong, like it's insane that he's at the age that he's at, and you're only offering to retain that little amount of, I mean, he's got a huge contract. He's got huge, like, it's insane. But again, the teams tend to make crazy deals. Now, Kevin Cheveldayoff historically won't be part of, and you don't need Erik Karlsson on this team. So you're not going to make that deal. But the reality is he doesn't make those deals anyways. He's going to go off the board. He's not going to go for someone that everybody is in the mix for. I thought it was interesting that Taves was brought up kind of matter of factly with with Weber yesterday in the chat with the panel. And so as a quick aside though, boys, I will say, I have to say, because I didn't say it on last night's show, I very much enjoyed yesterday's broadcast. I actually thought it was an excellent, probably one of the best Jets broadcasts I think I've ever watched, because the subject matter was the Winnipeg Jets for the entirety of the broadcast that folks are watching. And that is very rare. And I think I understand why sometimes networks can't do that. But I have to say it was thoroughly enjoyable, and it should be a lesson to those who are broadcasting Jets games, that folks in Winnipeg, Manitoba, or around the world who follow the Winnipeg Jets are interested in the Jets, and that should be the subject matter of between the periods. Anyways, quick aside from me, because I thought it was an excellent broadcast. I thought it deserved mention. But anyways, and I'm with Ez though. I do agree in the sense that I do think you do need you could use a shutdown defenseman, and people are like, well, it's going to push down Ville Heinola. Well, that's okay. Like Ville Heinola's, playoff experience right now is playing for the Moose in last season. And so he's a young player. He's not going to be that guy you're going to really rely on. At least I don't think yet in Rick Bowness's system.
Another guy I wanted to throw out there, boys, a guy who I believe the Jets, I'm not sure who it was reported by, had interest in, Vladislav Gavrikov on the Blue Jackets. He's a shutdown defenseman. Yeah. He used to be paired up with David Savard. You remember a couple of years back, all the David Savard talk, obviously, the price for Gavrikov could be a first-round pick. Mm-hmm. But, Gavrikov, Matthias Ekholm, like, to me, that style of defenseman, Dave, would really go a long way for the Jets. Once you get into a series, whether you're playing the Minnesota Wild, whether you're playing the Colorado Avalanche, like whoever the Jets end up playing in the first round, yeah, I mean, you're going to need more of a prototypical shutdown defenseman. And they have guys like the Jets. I'm not saying that there's, the top six right now, I think, it is pretty set, right? Like we talked about that last week. You could have Ville Heinola come in for Dylan Sandberg, but this top six is what we expect the top six to look like, for the majority of the rest of the season. That depends if Chevy makes a move, of course. But just wanted to mention Vladislav Gavrikov, big guy, 6'2", 6'3", well over 200 pounds. He's a big guy. So that type of defenseman, I'm not sure if he plays on the right side or just exclusively on the left side. But, Gavrikov is a guy that I know was on the Jets' radar. So just throwing another name out there. But, Johnny Taves, Drew, I think, that would be there would be the romantic element of, the guy coming back from Winnipeg, everything like that. I just don't know how much, Jonathan Taves moves the needle at this point in his career for the Jets.
I would agree with that comment. I mean, I think if the price, if the price was negligible to acquire Jonathan Taves or reasonable to acquire Jonathan Taves, then I think you would go ahead and do it. But I don't think the price is going to be that reasonable. And I'm not sure. I agree with you. I don't know that he moves the needle. From my perspective, I'm targeting a forward more than I am a defenseman. I think the Jets need one more top 9 forward, a guy that can play. More likely than not, a winger would be where I think they would be looking. A guy that can play higher in the lineup if necessary. A guy who can play lower in the lineup and shore up the bottom 6 if necessary. Almost a a Matthew Perreault-esque, a Michael Frolik-esque kind of guy or even a Paul Stastny kind of guy who can move up and down your lineup as warranted and as needed. Because I look at the Jets forwards, and obviously, the Dubois, Connor, Ehlers, elite, no question about it. Scheifele, elite. Perfetti, when healthy and confident, he's getting there. I don't know if he's necessarily elite. That would probably be a little bit too quick, but he's definitely getting to the point where it's something a team has to game plan against. And when Wheeler is on, he can still be, a significant contributor. It's when he's not on. It's for, when you can see games where he just doesn't have the same legs underneath him. He just doesn't have the same sort of get up and go because he's getting up there in age, and that's perfectly reasonable. But somebody who, when Wheeler is experiencing one of those games, can maybe step in and take some of that burden off of him, allow him to play in a bit of a different role at times. That's who
doesn't Sean Monahan fit that role?
Well, Sean.
I've been talking about Sean Monahan now
for
3 weeks because of the fact that he can play center and wing.
Sure.
And that the Jets love that. Like, how many guys right now, David Gustafson, Kevin Stenlund, they can play center, they can play wing, right? Like,
Sam Gagner.
Yeah, exactly. Sam Gagner. I mean, even Blake Wheeler obviously has played some center, right? But so Sean Monahan is a guy that if I'm the Jets, to me, that improves your top nine, and it fits your description of a guy that can move into the top six.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the one guy that I keep coming back to as it concerns forwards. But when you're talking about guys like Bo Horvat and Brock Besser, I just don't know if it's realistic to think the Jets are going to go after one of those guys, because first off, you're going to have to give up a ton to get Bo Horvat, and then Brock Besser, apparently Minnesota is really after him. So We'll see. But Horvat, Besser, Ryan O'Reilly, Patrick Kane, Tarasenko, there's a lot of guys out there.
Right. Those guys are going to cost, an arm and a leg. I mean, I think Ryan O'Reilly would be a wonderful acquisition. That's a guy who, can win draws for you, an area where the Jets have struggled so far this year, 25th in the NHL in the face-off circle.
But he's essentially a rental, right, Drew? I don't know.
But so is Monahan. I mean, but he's a rental that's going to cost you a lot less than I think Ryan O'Reilly will. The Jets have obviously done some successful trade deadline moves with the Blues when they acquired Paul Stastny that first time. So there is some history and some familiarity there.
Shout out to Eric Foley, right, Dave?
Right. In terms of the Jets, that was it. That was the trade. It was Eric Foley and a first-round pick for Paul Stastny. And of course, Eric Foley's career got derailed by, I believe it was concussions, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And obviously you never want to see that happen. That's
he
terrible.
played college and then never played pro.
Right. It just.
I think didn't he get hurt in the Red Wing? What's that Red Wings one they do up in the
UP? Prospects? Yeah. They do that in where? Traverse City, I think. The Traverse City Prospects tournament.
UP, Drew.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so you don't want to see that happen, but I don't think the Jets are in the market for anybody that isn't a rental. I'd be surprised if there was somebody out there with term.
If it is term, Drew, it's probably going to be a guy that has 1 or 2 years left on his contract.
Well, I think it would be a guy with term that fits in with the window that they're currently in, with Scheifele and Dubois and Hellebuck and Wheeler and everybody else. Because a guy, it would be. I mean, first of all, you never see trades of guys who have 4, 5, 6 years left on their deal unless there's extenuating circumstances that are going on. So that certainly wouldn't be a typical move for this Jets team, or any team for that matter. But it's usually a guy with a year maybe, or a pending UFA, like a Monahan, like an O'Reilly, that might not necessarily cost. I mean, Patrick Kane is going to be, every team's going to want Patrick Kane, but he's going to cost you an absolute fortune, because he should. He's still Patrick Kane. He's still, one of the, when playing, I think he's still probably one of the top, did you say top 10 wingers?
Offensively, yeah.
Offensively, yeah.
Yeah, offensively, I think you could make the argument he's still a top 10 right winger. Defensively is another story. I just don't think Kane fits in with the Jets for a variety of reasons, right? Maybe Chevy will shock us and he'll bring in Patrick Kane. But yeah, I agree, Drew. The price you're going to have to pay, I don't think is worth bringing in Patrick Kane, but certainly, he is a guy that would move the needle, right? If you're a good team and, you're trying to load up for the playoffs, then yeah, Patrick Kane is a guy that can help you. And the Rangers are a team that he's been linked to a lot, right? But yeah, I mean, look, at the Jets have the first round pick to trade this year, and it's a little bit early. I don't think anybody's expecting Chevy to make any trades in the next week or two or anything like that. It's most likely going to be, at some point closer to the trade deadline. But I think there's no doubt, guys, that, there's players out there. And when you consider, the Avalanche are going to get Gabe Landeskog back. They're going to get Valerie Nichushkin back. They're going to get Bowen Byram back. You have to think about not just Colorado, but you have to think about, Vegas and Dallas. Those teams are also going to be looking to acquire players, right?
Yeah.
So I think there is going to be a bit of an arms race, in the Western Conference leading up to the trade deadline.
And an advantage the Jets have is they are projected to have just about $7.5 million of cap room come the trade deadline, which is something that they can certainly use to their advantage. When we come back, Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press joins us on the program for more Jets talk. It's a Saturday morning. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rollies and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rollies Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rollies, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollies.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly, see lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Bottom of hour number one. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning, eagerly awaiting the arrival of Hammer. Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press going to join us to talk about the Jets and their successes as of late. A successful road trip, of course, concluded yesterday in Pittsburgh with the Jets being victorious 4-1, a very tidy, very handy victory over the Pittsburgh Penguins. We're pleased to welcome back to the program our very good friend, the handsome one himself, Jeff Hamilton, joins us on the air. Jeffrey, good morning. How are you, good sir?
Very good morning to you guys. I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Fine.
We're good. Is that okay that Drew calls you Jeffrey, by the way? Like, I feel like that's something that your family, like your parents might call you, but I don't know if you're okay, Hammer, with Drew calling you that. I think we should just clear that up right off the bat.
Holy, sabotaging the show, just clearing this. Yeah, absolutely. It's okay. I mean, I would say that if of all the names I've adopted over my media, time in media, Jeffrey hasn't stuck to the top. However, classy host like Drew, full name, full opportunity. Here we go. I'm not going to complain about that.
If I can call Hockey Night in Canada the star Ken Weep Kenneth, then why can't I call you Jeffrey? I'm going to start calling Ken. I'm going to start calling him Kenneth. You can call me Andrew. That's my name. You can feel free to start referring to me as Andrew. It'll be good. I got to, Scott Billick will become a different name altogether. Mike McIntyre is Michael from now on. Ted Wyman is Theodore. I can keep going if you want.
Tedley. Tedley, I like to call Ted.
Tedley?
Tedley.
Like
Add to your arsenal, yeah.
Okay.
My favorite is when you and Ted are on the road covering the Bombers and you do your Instagram stories. Like, I feel like I'm your biggest fan when you guys do those.
Oh, they're ridiculous. But it's funny with him too. I mean, not to cut that off. Thank you, as but it's his name's actually Edward.
Oh, sure, that makes sense.
So
Ted Rogers. His real name is Edward, so that makes sense that Edward would be his name. But it's more fun to come up with a completely random name that isn't necessarily associated with the first name. It can be vaguely associated. I'm really
100%.
a little hyper this morning between the snake conversation and the first name conversation. I think Dave's going to cut my mic any minute now.
I can think of a few names for you, Drew. By the way, if you want me to share those on air right now.
No, you can maybe save them. Text them to me later, as we can discuss those off air. Jeff, good morning. Obviously here to talk about the Winnipeg Jets. A road trip that didn't start in the most impressive of manners. The weird game in Detroit, the Hellebuckian goalie effort in Buffalo, and then one of the most complete efforts of the season last night in Pittsburgh. You look at this Jets team, and there's no reason, from my perspective, that there shouldn't be mentioned among the top teams and in the same breath as the top teams in the Western Conference, as we're now beyond the halfway point and the Jets just keep on rolling. So it's no longer a mirage, not that it has been for a while, but this Jets team, Jeff, just is looking like one of the best teams in the Western Conference from my perspective.
Well, look, if you want to go off the theory you are what your record is, well then they're one of the better teams in the league, absolutely. And I think early on in the season, I think it was even if you compare it to the previous year, through about 15, 16 games or whatever it was, maybe a bit more than that, the Jets were leading the Central last year, and they were up in that area around that 20 game mark too. And I think there was maybe a little less believing in it just because of what we'd seen through the first 20 games. A lot of that, we knew there was going to be growing pains for this team with the installment of new systems under Rick Bowness. We definitely saw that, but we saw the Jets not only tread water, but get carve out victories that maybe otherwise they didn't deserve, if you will. I think there's certainly nights last year and in previous years where the Jets deserved to win and didn't win. They weren't winning a lot of those nights where they didn't deserve to win. I think maybe that was the difference early on, and so maybe there was a little bit of skepticism just because even then Rick Bowness wasn't even on the bench for a good chunk of that. And so, anyways, fast forward to the midway mark, and I think just because fans are used to kind of seeing things drop off, there's always been that fear or hesitancy to believe whether this team's for real or whatever. But I just think when you look at the 41 games for this team, there's been a lot more consistent efforts than non-consistent efforts. I mean, of course, there's been those games. You can look at Detroit. You can even look at the Vancouver victory. As games that weren't to, if you will, Winnipeg Jets hockey under Rick Bowness. But there's been, way more nights where they've been consistent, where it's almost kind of wondering, you still wonder each game which team you're going to get. But I think we're getting more of an answer now because of those more consistent efforts. And you're going to see games like Detroit. I mean, I think that's the beauty and, what we do, what you guys do on the show with what Kenny and Rennie do on their post-game show, and I join it sometimes, is that it's just so easy to kind of dissect and be critical of losses because we've seen such a consistent team that in reality, every single team in the NHL is going to put up stinkers like we saw, against Detroit. That just happens all the time. To ask a team to have 82 games the way in which Rick Bowness wants them to play and not have these guys kind of have nights off or off games or whatever you want to classify it is ridiculous. So I think, to answer your question, this team is absolutely up there with the upper echelon. They beat teams they're supposed to beat. They compete hard against teams, wrap up a good, a decent road trip with a good game. Like you said, a complete game against the Pittsburgh Penguins, a team that's been playing well this season as well. It's just, I don't see, for anyone who's looking for the Jets to kind of dip or fall off, I mean, right now is not the time. With the injection of health they've received over the last, few games here, there's no reason to think that they're only going to get better. And we've certainly seen efforts up and down the lineup, more consistent efforts from this team that suggest that this second half should be an exciting one for fans.
And just to kind of take your point a little bit further with another team that, like, you could find a bunch of, as you said, hammer examples, but Colorado just lost to Chicago, right? And they're still without...
every single night. Anyone who has an issue with their team losing to a bad team, go check the ticker every single night. A good team loses to a bad team. Guess what? Sometimes even on home ice.
Absolutely. And I want to ask you, I mean, I can't not ask you. I guess I could ask you about a lot of different players, but we need to talk to you about Cole Perfetti, because, Mike McIntyre, your colleague in the Free Press, had the quote from Perfetti talking about, how he was vomiting and how he really felt awful, during that Sabres game. And then he comes back and he has arguably maybe his best game as a Jet, right? Like 3 assists. That line with Scheifele and Wheeler was incredible last night. Like clearly, like by far the best line on the ice, and Perfetti, started off a little bit slow, but just how impressed were you with that effort by Perfetti, considering that, he was praying to the porcelain gods, 24 hours earlier?
Well, it's funny, right? Because it's almost kind of weird how sometimes, like, I've had this in the past in my, whatever, mediocre sports career, but in general, you hear a lot about it. Sometimes you almost play better when you're sick. You're thinking less. You're, whatever. Now, I'm not suggesting he would have been any state that he was the day before. I mean, I don't think you go from the bathroom stall to the ice feeling awesome if there isn't a bit of a time frame of feeling a bit better between. And I'm not suggesting that his sickness led to his greatness, but I guess I am in a little bit. But I think what we saw last night was an example of kind of what we've seen from this kid throughout his maturity throughout the NHL. We've seen some moments this season. I remember, there's some individual efforts, none of which stick out more than the time when he scored that, that goal in Phoenix, in Arizona, again, that new Mullet Arena, where it was just an individual effort from from the opponent's blue line, and then drove the net and scored. I mean, this guy he has a high hockey IQ. He's a smart player. He deserves to be put around great players, players who, and I think with Mark Scheifele and, Blake Wheeler, 2 guys who have chemistry, I think they're helping his game along as well. And that's always been his bread and butter, has been his hockey IQ. I mean, it's so funny, right? We tend to accentuate some of the big positives like his hockey IQ, and then dismiss his skating for some reason because he's not Kyle Connor, right? Like he's not driving wide like all of a sudden he doesn't know how to skate, but he's got it all. And I mean, he's got that. And I think I give a lot of credit to the Jets coaching staff because they've helped him evolve in his game, particularly around the injury front. Like a big thing for Cole Perfetti for a while there was that tendency that many players have in junior to turn their back to a player on the board. It's led to him being injured. He's gone through tons of tape and has fixed elements of his game. So I think right now he's just constantly in that learning process and adjusting to, either getting rid of some of those habits from junior or just strengthening some of the habits you need at this level to excel. And there's no surprise on what this guy is capable of doing. And when you put him and when you surround him around good players, he's going to make things happen. And it's an exciting thing because he's also a great, as you guys know, he's a great human being too. I mean, he came onto the scene and you're thinking to yourself, like, holy smokes, like this is kind of captain material, the way he conducts himself, the way he handles himself, the way he's clearly able to be coached and all those things that you need to be a good player in this league. So he's got the tool set. And I think we'll continue to see some more impressive outings, but certainly when you look at what happened in Pittsburgh, 91 was certainly playing 100.
Saturday morning, you're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms. Jeffrey Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press joins yours truly, Andrew Mindell, David Manouk, and Ezra Ginsburg as we're talking about the Winnipeg Jets.
Jeff, we're still 6 weeks away from the trade deadline, and I could very easily ask you about that. But I don't know that there's a bigger mid-season acquisition than Nikolai Ehlers right now. And, he's only played 4 games since his return from sports hernia surgery, 3 goals, 5 assists. But I don't know about you, but even I'm impressed. And, the Dubois and Connor line, anybody you pair with them has been doing well. You put a guy with Ehlers' talent on it, it's going to only go that much greater for that trio. But are you even a little bit surprised by how good he's been since his return? Because we know that that's the type of surgery that could slow one down. He doesn't appear to be slowed down. And, in terms of Jets, everyone's clamoring, especially when they were kind of in that little bit of a free fall. Obviously, they've now won 6 of 7. Every trade. Well, I don't know that you're going to get a better player in a trade than Nikolai Ehlers right now.
Well, yeah, I think for a long time there, I think there was some major doubt that Nikolai Ehlers was necessarily for sure coming back when he came back. I think for a while there, it was touch and go, and certainly trying to figure out his comfort level with with an injury, if you will, that's not unique to the league, but it's unique in your recovery, and that it's you kind of have to give it its full time. So I mean, that's just a nice transition to your answer as far as like, was it a surprise? I don't know if surprised is the right word, just because we've seen this guy. We've seen what Nikolai Ehlers is capable at this league. We've seen what his speed can do. We see individually, right? I mean, when you put him with a solid line, good things are going to happen. We've seen that in the past, and so I don't know if it was surprise, but I would say, like, when you watched his first game, you could tell he was missing hockey. You could tell he was, he wanted to kind of make up for all those games in one game. And, you got to get back to game shape, which we saw a few times in his first game back. It's just kind of looked like he was injured while he was just gasping for breath because it's, you can work out with the trainers, you can do all the physical contact to get you ready for a game, but you can't replicate a game situation. So those, as much as you work out those muscles, there's just something about, the intensity of a game and how, and how you use those muscles that tend to give you a rough time at the beginning. So as much as it was a rough, maybe I don't want to even call it a rough start, maybe just a start you would expect, a bit of a slower one or whatever. He's just hit the ground running. I mean, and I think what's been obvious over the last couple games is the chemistry that he's brewing with that top line. I mean, they know where each other are. I mean, this is I think, to your point before about the trade deadline and people kind of clamoring for help after all those guys went down. I think Nikolai Ehlers was always going to be that almost trade deadline acquisition given how long he was out, and I think the expectation was for him to get back to the player he was, but there's no guarantee that was going to happen immediately, or at least not as fast as it is. So I'm certainly surprised, no, absolutely impressed for sure with just what we've seen with them the last few games.
Well, let's talk about the trade deadline, Jeff. I'm not sure if you saw our opening segment, but that's what we were discussing. If you had to pick one position of priority, based on what Kevin Cheveldayoff said earlier this week, it sounds like the Jets are going to be active. The Jets are going to be a buyer come trade deadline day, and that's no surprise, of course, given where they currently are in the standings and given the roster and salary cap situation that's advantageous for them. If you're picking one position, what position are the Winnipeg Jets upgrading between now and the deadline?
So it's an interesting question. What do I think is going to happen versus what do I think should happen are a couple different answers. I think
you can answer both if you want.
I think, personally, and I don't know, I just think they need to add to the defense. I think we've seen some solid. I mean, obviously we've seen some solid efforts with the defense. I mean, I think this is a team that's been trying to add to their defense from the beginning, right? I mean, and which is interesting when you talk about how many excess players they had on the blue line, and that you're surprised they weren't shipping guys the other way. So that comes as part of it. But I don't know if that's. I mean, when you look at some of the names that are out there, you look at some of the trade baits out there. Like, I look at a guy like John Klingberg, right, adding more offense. Well, I don't think he really, there's lots of talk about him not, gelling well with Rick Bowness, or them having, their differences or whatever. But I mean, he was also there for years. I mean, you look at a guy like Anthony Duclair, and it's not even that I think some people are going to disagree with necessarily, might look for more offensive power, more to round out some of those forward lines. But the defense is the ultimate piece. I mean, besides a goalie, you obviously need a goalie to help you out in the playoffs. But I think, championship teams are built through the blue line out, and we've seen some good efforts. But I think that's right now, to me, is the Jets' kind of Achilles heel, is their depth on defense. And if you can bring another notable guy in, a guy who can, a top four, a guy who can log, and again, this is nearly impossible to get, a guy who can log 25 minutes in a game, that's going to turn this, with the offensive power this team has and the structure that they've put in place. I think that's going to be the biggest, that would be the biggest piece, or the massive, improvement, I think would put this team over the top. That being said, I think we're looking more at a forward additions. I think there's going to be some depth there. I really do have this feeling that the Jets are going to go after Jonathan Taves. I really do think that, I'm hearing some kind of, mumblings that like people are saying he doesn't want to come back to Winnipeg. That's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing this is an opportunity for him, that I don't think he would have viewed years ago in his tenure. I think this is, I don't see it as a permanent landing spot. I see this as an improvement, particularly in the face-off dot. Now, I'm not advocating for this call. I feel like that's where it's kind of trending. We've seen the comfort that Kevin Cheveldayoff has with the Chicago Blackhawks in making deals. There is that Winnipeg connection that, again, I don't know would have been all that appetizing before in his career. But we also know that Rick Bowness, puts a lot of emphasis on face-off wins. And that's what Jonathan Toews, I think, would bring to this team. Obviously would bring experience. But the Jets forwards, I mean, the Jets just aren't very good in the face-off dot. And so I think that would be a possibility. But, obviously if you want to get into some of the, sexier picks, if you will, like I did listen to your segment off the top, and, while it would be great for the Jets, I think it would be a great landing spot for both sides in getting a guy like Bo Horvat. I just think it's going to be tough for this team to enter those kind of like negotiations and be the team that comes out of it. I mean, it would be almost a victory, if you will, if they were if the second team, if they just lost out, it feels. I mean, I know that's not a great way to view it. And who knows, anything can happen. There could be opportunity here for sure, but it's an interesting one nonetheless. I mean, this is the most important trade deadline of Kevin Cheveldayoff's tenure here in Winnipeg, and critical to this team's success, not just this season per se. I mean, obviously you'd be wanting to build for that opportunity when you look around the locker room and look at the expiring contracts and how many guys are up in a couple seasons. You do want to make hay with that group, but you also might be looking for something a little bit long term. We often hear with the Jets connected to trades, they want term. Well, guess what? Every team wants term. It's just, every team wants, but term usually comes with a higher price tag. But I think therein lies the rub, where I think the Jets are willing to give up big pieces, but they want enough in return to warrant those big pieces. And so, there's obviously lots of other names too, like Barbashev's a name that's been tossed out over the last while. And I think there would be, I think in this case, I mean, it's hard to predict who will end up in Winnipeg or what kind of action there will be. But I would say this, if the trade deadline comes and goes, we've seen these deadlines come and go to disappointment, particularly this offseason, and it worked out. All you really needed was Rick Bowness, apparently. So,
Jeff, I thought Jordy Ben was a great acquisition. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, yeah, there you go. Exactly. Just bringing some massive experience. So but no, I just mean in general, you did trust this team. Now it's time to help out this team, because there's going to be teams that are building at the deadline. There's going to be good teams that get better. I think the Jets need to be one of those clubs to stay in the mix and really have a real shot here. Clearly, they've put in the pieces and they played the right way through half a season. It's it's depending on what they can do this second half. If they can retool, if you will, add a couple key pieces, this could be a very dangerous team come the spring.
Well, speaking of dangerous, Johnny Toews, I mean, the more I listen to you talk about Johnny Toews, it makes a lot of sense, right? And I mentioned this to Drew, right? Like that would be, almost romantic, right? Like Johnny Toews finishing off his career in the city that he was born, right? And if you could go Scheifele, Dubois, Toews, Lowry up the middle, I mean, David Gustafsson might have to play wing in that scenario, but that would just be incredible 1 to 4 center depth. So, and he's in the last year of his contract. I don't know if you mentioned that. I know you know that, Hammer, but so I mean, Toews makes a lot more sense for the Jets than for me, like Patrick Kane, for example, or Erik Karlsson, who you're going to have to give up even more to acquire, right? But regardless of who the Jets acquire or what position they isolate in terms of where they feel like their depth needs to be better, don't you look at the Western Conference? Like I look at the Western Conference, and for me, one of the reasons why the Jet, if there's any year that the Jets should be going in, Hammer, it's because of how wide open the Western Conference is. Like, yes, the Vegas Golden Knights are arguably the best team in the Western Conference right now, but the Colorado Avalanche are in serious danger of missing the playoffs. I don't think they are going to miss the playoffs. I think once they get healthier and they get guys like Valeri Nichushkin back and Bo Byram and Gabe Landeskog, I feel like Colorado's going to have a serious push and they're going to make the playoffs. They might even bring in a guy like, Bo Horvat is a guy that's been linked to the Avalanche. But isn't that a reason why, in addition to the fact that you've got guys like, Hellebuck and Scheifele and Dubois on expiring contracts, isn't that the main argument why you go for it? Because the Western Conference is maybe more wide open than it's been in a long time.
Oh, absolutely. I think, and I think the corner offices over in True Northland, I think they're thinking the exact same thing. I mean, this isn't because you look around the league, you look around the Western Conference, and you even ask the average educated fan, like, who's going to come out of the West, who they're going to pick out of the West. A lot of people are still picking the Avalanche, despite not being in a playoff spot. Like, that's just the fact that they're a good team. They're an experienced team. They've obviously dealt with injuries. I don't think Winnipeggers or Winnipeg fans need to care, are going to shed a tear for that, given what we've seen in Winnipeg here. But, they're going to be a good team, but it just speaks to, like, as you said, as like just the wide openness of this Western Conference. I mean, even the team that, is coaching that your coach last year is leading your division. It's just like, it's one of those things where, is anyone really scared of Dallas? Like, not really. I mean, the Jets haven't had a ton of success against Vegas this year, but Vegas doesn't feel like they're, unbeatable. Everyone, and I think if we would be talking here and Colorado would be living up to their expectations and would be in first place right now in the Central, we'd all be talking about how impossible it would be for the Jets to surpass these guys. These are the reigning champs. These are the whatever. So yeah, I mean, I certainly think if you're looking at all the things, all the reasons, all the motivations that Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Jets have for adding key pieces and trying to build a team and give away, future assets and whatnot to build a winner today, there was already enough there. Right. There was enough with the talent, the pieces they have. They have the piece in net. They have the ability to score. Their defense is improved. Their systems are improved. They have guys on expiring contracts here where you want to show them that things are good here. I still find that to be a fascinating situation because it feels like a lose-lose for Winnipeg, because if these players have a really, really good couple of years, they're going to be coveted by the entire league. And if they have a really bad couple of years, they're going to want to change the scenery, but we can get into that some other time or later. But you have all those pieces. It's just another factor into why this year could be a special one for you, is the fact that the West doesn't have any, like clear-cut contender or clear-cut team that anyone around the league, I'd argue, in a playoff spot's looking at and being like, this is impossible, to win or to beat, or to have that kind of mental hurdle that some teams have when they've dominated throughout the year and you got to play them in the, a winner go home series.
5 minutes before the top of the hour, Saturday morning, you're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg, joined by Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press, discussing the Winnipeg Jets.
Jeff, yesterday was game 43 for the Jets, but 41, of course, is the midpoint of the season. When the Jets hit that midpoint, what were your reflections? What was your biggest storyline? What was the thing that, when you thought about the team at the preseason and now at the game 41 mark, what was the biggest storyline for you at the midway point of the 22-23 season?
A couple things. I say at the top of that list has to be the play of Connor Hellebuck. I don't think anyone's surprised to see Connor Hellebuck play the way he's playing this year. Just when you looked at what he went through last season, how much this team relied on him last year, to little success. Him coming in this season, I think, much like he rebounds back from a tough game, Connor Hellebuck proved this season he can bounce back from a tough year. There's obviously other factors at play. I mean, he was a new father. There was obviously a lot of the frustration and tension that comes with COVID and his protocols and all those things. That was tough on a lot of players, Hellebuck included. I think there was reason to see an improvement this year, an upgrade, but I just don't know to the level. I mean, you look at a lot, the Jets are averaging among the most shots against in the league. They're a team that, is just relied on, throughout. You talk about that early stretch of games where the Jets were able to, stay atop the Central Division despite not really deserving a lot of those victories or playing within the structure that Rick Bowness wanted them to play. That was all Connor Hellebuck for a lot of it. I mean, nothing to take away from David Riddick. He also had come in and helped bail out his team in certain instances as well. But Connor Hellebuyck's been the bread and butter of this team, and going to be a big reason for their success down the stretch here and into the playoffs. I mean, if you can get into the playoffs and you have a goalie like Connor Hellebuyck playing the way Connor Hellebuyck's been playing, there's no reason he can't steal a series for you. And I mean, that's often what you need out of your goaltender, is to steal a series, which is usually the second or third one, not the first. And so certainly Connor Hellebuyck, and I'd say a close second would be just the level of consistency of the Jets forward stars. Mark Scheifele's come out and played a significant, like a lot of guys who were pissed off and visibly upset at the end of last season to come in and really just answer the bell, like improve in all aspects. And I put Mark Scheifele there. I mean, Kyle Connor had a slow start as far as scoring goals, but certainly has found his way and back up to that clip of averaging more than 40 goals this year, potentially. And then you just look at the consistent, I mean, obviously Nikolai Ehlers coming back late, but far too often last year, Pierre-Luc Dubois, another one, obviously, the way he's playing and I don't want to say redefining his game, but he's constantly evolving in that power forward, that modern day powered forward in the NHL. And so anyways, this roundabout way of saying that it's just more guys are coming up consistently. So it's not like Mark Scheifele's, shining this game, and then it's Pierre-Luc Dubois shining this game, and then it's Kyle Connor taking over this game. And sometimes it's almost enough to win, but in far more occasions, it was almost just enough to barely lose. So it was, to see more of those consistent efforts night in, night out from the Jets' top guns, the highest paid players, I think is the biggest difference, among the biggest differences this year, behind the play of Connor Hellebuyck and the fact that he's, more often than not played a very, very key role in this team's success this year.
A successful Winnipeg Jets road trip, a successful visit from Lord Jeffrey of Hamilton here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Jeff, thanks so much for doing this, buddy. We'll let you get on with the weekend, and we'll do it again real soon.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me on. We'll chat soon.
There you go.
Thanks,
Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press joining us this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Jeff is royalty. It's good that you called him by his formal title, because he is a part of the royal family.
His formal title, Lord Jeffrey of Hamilton, of course. Yes.
Shouldn't it be Lord Jeffrey of Ottawa, though?
Why?
Because he's from Ottawa.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Little known fact.
Oh, look at you. Breaking news here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Or he might have just gone to school in Ottawa. I can't remember. It's one of the two.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure Jeff grew up in Winnipeg and he's from Winnipeg, but hey, Dave, if you want to believe that he's from Ottawa, then go ahead.
I'm pretty sure he has family in Ottawa.
Dave, I got a snake farm. I got a snake farm to sell you.
What kind of snakes do you have on that farm, Drew?
I really don't
anacondas.
You'd have to ask you'd have to consult with my
Black Mamba, Dave.
Yeah,
some boa constrictors.
I really have no idea. If I see
some rattlers,
I remember going to the San Diego Zoo.
Sidewinders.
I've been to the San Diego Zoo. That zoo is it's one of the best zoos in the world.
I went to the San Diego Zoo 2 years ago.
Well, it's a great zoo.
When I was at Torrey Pines.
No big deal.
Most people would say, "Well, I was at
Drew,
Torrey Pines."
Dave dropping Torrey Pines.
I know. Look at that. Sorry, Dave.
Torrey
Pines.
For the record, I didn't golf Torrey Pines. The fam did. I chose to go to Torrey Pines. I was next door to the Torrey Pines a nature reserve doing a hike. So all good.
In any event, Dave's at Torrey Pines. Everybody all bow to Dave and his royalty and his special being. Anyways, I'm going to talk about snakes, but forget it. We'll come back. We'll talk more about the Winnipeg Jets. Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show coming up next. At the bottom of the hour, Sean Shapiro joins us for some more Jets talk and a look around the NHL. Don't go anywhere. It's a Saturday morning with Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, and Ezra Ginsburg.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rollies and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Big thanks to Jeff Hamilton for joining us on the program. Always great to catch up with Hammer. His insights into the Winnipeg Jets, always unvarnished and speaking the truth. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. It's hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve hockey shows. Thank you, Spencer, for the shout out to Snakes and Ladders. It is,
and by the way, Snakes and Ladders, if you want me to go and I can get a couple pictures, a name of a horse we used to own at Assiniboine Downs.
Okay, hang on. So he's not just at Torrey Pines, folks. He's also owning horses. And
That's
you guys
right.
are accusing me of being the multimillionaire in the Grid Park.
Well, for anybody
Dave is the moneyed elite, and I'm just a humble actor on a YouTube TV commercial.
For the record, for anybody who's ever owned a horse, you know that doesn't make you a millionaire. It makes you poor, actually. And we own the ass end of the horse, and it was a family thing. And that's it. So
family horse money.
You can own just one part of the horse.
Yeah, they always gave us the ass, which was unfortunate because it's usually the head that wins the race. So the ass was never really the valuable part. Problem is, he thinks I'm being serious right now.
I think that's horse humor is what's happening right now. And
I wasn't going to say anything because I don't really know a lot about horses.
Yeah.
Aside from what was that talking horse? Was it Mr. Ed?
Yes, that was Mr. Ed, Ezra.
Yeah, aside from Mr. Ed, I don't really know a lot about horses, but I'd like to know more about the world of equestrian.
Well, that's fine. Well, equestrian is different than horse racing.
Equestrian is different than horse racing, you know. That's
but
it involves horses.
Yes, you can't do equestrian without horses.
I like watching the horses like jumping over the things.
Yeah,
like
Big
when they have those little horse shows.
With Ian Miller.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to ask you if you can remember his name.
The most famous Canadian show jumper. Come on, Drew.
I remembered his name.
I remember many a Saturday morning when I was looking for something to watch, and somehow Saturday afternoon, I should say, and somehow like in Calgary, what's the name of that famous place they've got in Calgary?
Stampede.
No. It's like for the equestrian,
the horse park. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called.
The last time I was on a horse was at Falcon Trails Resort.
That poor
oh, God, they should
it wasn't poor horse. It was
they shot the horse with Ezzy on it. Still,
because we had when I used to work at Cushman and Wakefield, we went to Falcon Trails and we did they just put you on a horse and then you walk slowly, horse behind horse. And I wanted the white horse because most of them were brown, but I liked the white one. But the person said this one's can get a little bit testy and a little bit grumpy. And he started agitating the horse in front of me. And that horse whip kicked my horse, but it also kicked me in the process. So that was not
really.
Fun.
You got kicked by a horse.
I did get kicked by a horse.
Dangerous to get kicked by a horse there.
I remember I was once riding at Birds Hill Park, and the horse, my friend was on a horse, and the horse broke its bit. You know, the part that holds it that you can steer the horse with, essentially. Yeah. And
sure, Dave, you could have said whatever you wanted there, and we would have just agreed with it.
And I'm not joking. The horse took off, and I was like, okay, I think I'm done horse riding for a while.
So you went to horse ownership. You
Yeah,
figured you get somebody else to ride the horse for you.
I feel like there could be a spin-off show here, Jews and Horses. I don't know. We could probably, maybe get that going on a weekly basis.
Sure.
I think we do enough shows. I'll be perfectly honest. The idea of a spinoff.
And by the way, thanks to the chat, it is Spruce Meadows.
Spruce
That's T. Conapoli had that one. So thank you, T. Conapoli, for that. Remember that memory of the name of the
I believe T. Conapoli has a stable of horses at home.
Perhaps.
Yeah. People don't necessarily think in Transcona they have a lot of horses, but that is not actually true. Horse ownership is very high in Transcona.
Yes.
Really, you said yes there. You said yes. You decided to go along with whatever the nonsense he
I
was
always go
doing.
along with Ezzy.
Drew, you had a pony.
I did not have a pony. Nobody ever. Who would think that an immigrant would have a pony?
T. Conapoli. It's a brittle in a bit.
Oh, T. Conapoli knows his horse lingo clearly more than at least more than I do. Dave seems to be well versed in the subject matter as well. In any event, this is
for the record. This will be my last deviation from the show, but last show too. But if you get a chance and you go to the Downs for the summer, it is a good way to spend the night. They're not even sponsoring us, but I'm happy to give them a shout out because
tell Darren Dunn that Illegal Curve sent you, and his response will be, "Who the hell are those guys?"
But I'm telling you, it is a fun way to spend an evening at the Downs. You don't have to gamble. I'm not a big gambler, so there you go.
Dave just likes to get up close and
I like the ponies.
With the ponies.
I like the ponies.
Jets next in action tomorrow night against the Coyotes, the Arizona Coyotes. Ezzy, have you ridden the Coyote? I hope not. But the Coyotes, as we all know, are not a very good hockey team. And so the Winnipeg Jets have done a pretty good job this year of taking care of business against not pretty good hockey teams. And by and large, that's what this Jets schedule has in store for them for the remainder of this month. So it's hard to believe a team that has won 7 of their last 8 is really into a soft spot in their schedule from here until the end of the month, and then they get the 2 weeks off. So this Jets team right now has got to be looking at the upcoming opportunity and saying, and pardon the pun here, that this is their opportunity to make hay before they get the 2 weeks off. Thank you,
well done, Drew.
Thank you. But you got Arizona tonight. You got 4 games this week. You got Arizona, you got Montreal. That game against Toronto is certainly going to draw a lot of eyeballs and a lot of attention because the Jets and the Maple Leafs are the 2 best teams in Canada. And then you got the Ottawa Senators on Saturday night. So we know that this is an important stretch for the Jets in that this is a real opportunity to. I mean, they're clearly firmly in a playoff spot, but they can even really create extra separation between them and the teams that theoretically would be chasing them that are currently out of the playoffs in the Central Division.
Guys, I was buffering there for about 25 seconds. So I don't know what it looked like to you guys, but I didn't hear any of the conversation over the last 20
It was funny because
seconds.
Well, it's funny because I looked at Ez and he didn't laugh at Drew's joke, and I was like, "Well, that was a pretty good joke." I thought it deserved at least a high course ha.
All I saw was black screens and then the wheel of death, as I like to call it. So
it looked like Ezzy's in the running for a new computer, folks.
Yes,
it's not just me anymore.
Yes,
I took care of business. It's Ezzy's turn.
Maybe Dale Sawchuk's point is right. Maybe that wasn't a question. Maybe it was more of a statement, Drew.
It was more of a statement, but that's usually how you guys can pick up on my statements and expound yourselves.
That's true. Anyways, as the question / statement from Drew was about
we were talking about the schedule,
soft part of the schedule and the Jets' ability to make hay, if you will. And then I laughed accordingly.
Because we like to always bring up our farming backgrounds, right, boys? Growing up here in River Heights and Tuxedo, right? Dave Emily grew up in the North End, but still, we all have extensive farming backgrounds.
Conversation, as he worked with the horse conversation.
Exactly. Yeah, I have lots of plow experience myself. So, look at it. I mean, the schedule, there's no doubt that it's a little bit easier. And you have a back-to-back against Ottawa and Philly on the road, and you have 5 games coming up after the Jets Coyotes game tomorrow at Canada Life Center. But it's definitely not a daunting schedule, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to face some teams that are going to be desperate, right? We talked about it, like the games against Nashville and St. Louis. Like, these teams know that if they're going to make their move, it's going to be now, guys, right? Like, Colorado is only going to get better once they get some more of their bodies back. And, when you talk about, some of these other teams, like Montreal obviously has not a lot to play for. They're not going to be making the playoffs, but the Toronto Maple Leafs, that's going to be a big test. That's the game of the next 9 games. That's when you're circling and you're saying that, okay, if we're able to knock off the Leafs with all of the injuries that they've had on the back end, they're healthier now, of course, but, that's going to be a big test. It's always, fun for the Jets, I think, to play in Toronto. There's always a good number of Jets fans that are living in Toronto or visiting Toronto. But, I mean, there's no reason, guys, to think that the Jets are going to be a 110, 115 point team, and they're going to be a top 2 team in the Central and possibly the Western Conference, right? Like, the way I look at the standings and the rest of the season, like, I would be shocked. Like, the worst I could see the Jets slipping to is maybe 3rd in the Central, but I don't think the Jets, unless they go on some type of 6 or 7 or 8 game losing streak, they should be, 1 or 2 in the Central Division, or maybe you slip down to 3rd, if Minnesota or Colorado makes a significant run. But to me, there's a big division between the teams I just mentioned and then, the Nashvilles and the St. Louis's. Like, I think it's going to be really hard for the Blues or Predators, to catch up to the Wild. Certainly they're not catching the Jets or Stars, but everybody knows that the Avalanche are the team that you have to look out for as far as the team that's going to make a push up the standings.
Well, and you talk about the Avalanche, and I think that let's talk about them. They're still not in a playoff spot, and I agree with you that you expect them to eventually get into that playoff spot. But you wonder, just getting there, is that going to take up so much of their effort and so much of what they have in the tank that that they will be vulnerable even as a playoff team? That said, you of course don't want to play them because they're the defending Stanley Cup champions, and if they get healthy, they're going to be dripping with talent. But you can only sort of scratch and claw for so long before it eventually wears on you, before it eventually wears you out. There's a reason why what the Tampa Bay Lightning have been doing for so many years is so impressive, given how much more hockey they've played than all the other teams in the league, just by virtue of their success. Their success almost becomes not a burden, but it becomes a mitigating factor.
It's expected. Like, the Lightning are always just now expected to go on a long run.
But eventually you would think it's going to catch up to them. It speaks to their professionalism. It speaks to their dedication that it hasn't negatively impacted, that they've probably played an extra season of hockey more than a lot of other teams in the NHL over the last number of years. And you wonder if Colorado is going to maybe be facing a similar situation because they don't have the depth that they had last year. And that's certainly been a factor for them. I mean, Darren Helm, I think, just got re-injured again. And he's got a different injury than the one he had suffered, but he's going to be out of the lineup. You look at the Avalanche roster, and I know you're expecting everyone's expecting, some sort of moves there and some sort of augmentations there to try and help with that injury bug. But you wonder if it's going to happen, if they're going to be able to do it. This is a team that doesn't have Kadri anymore. They've been bitten by the injury bug ad nauseum all year long, like a lot of other teams. But you wonder if the Avs are maybe just, they have to chalk it up at some point in time to not necessarily their year. Like, exactly like Craig says in the chat here, the Avs are weaker in net. They, the goaltending isn't as strong as it was last year. No Kadri, no Burakovsky having a great year in Seattle. Kadri, in Calgary now, of course. When does it eventually become that Colorado just doesn't have it this year for whatever reason?
Well, you're talking about two different things, right? You're talking about them getting into the playoffs versus winning the Stanley Cup, right? I agree with you, Drew. Look at Nazem Kadri. They brought in Evan Rodriguez, but Evan Rodriguez is not Nazem Kadri, all due respect, right? Burakovsky, they have not replaced, and he's a good player. You're right. He's tearing it up for the Kraken. He's a big reason, along with Matty Beniers, why the Kraken have turned their fortunes around, right? They were a non-playoff team this year. Most likely they are going to be a playoff team, right? Currently on a nice winning streak. So yeah, I think, look at right now, I wouldn't say Colorado is a Stanley Cup favorite. Like, if you're asking me right now who, is at the top of the list for Stanley Cup favorites, both of those teams are probably in the East. I like Boston and I like Carolina. And don't forget that Tampa Bay was an 8 seed last year. They faced Florida, who was the President's Trophy winners, and beat them, right? So it's not like you have to be, every year we say this, right? 3 years back, 4 years back, Columbus upset Tampa Bay in the first round before they won their 2 Stanley Cups, right? So being an 8 seed, but your point is well taken though, Drew, in terms of like, are they going to have to scratch and claw and just barely get into the playoffs? And then coupled with the long playoff run that they went on last year, are they going to run out of gas, whether that's in the first round or the second round or whatever? But it kind of goes back to my point with Hammer, Dave. Like, I think this Western Conference is just completely wide open. You look at the East and, it's possible that Boston's going to get Tampa Bay in the first round. Or, Toronto's going to have to play,
Well, Toronto's going to probably have to play Tampa Bay.
I was going to say Tampa Bay, which we've seen before, right? But the reality is, like, Carolina looks like they're loaded and ready to go on a long playoff run. Kochetkov has been, he's in the Calder Trophy discussion. I don't think he's been talked about enough as being in the Calder Trophy discussion. But, are you are you happy with your goaltending? Like, is Kochetkov and Freddie Anderson going to get it done? I have no idea, but certainly the Western Conference is wide open.
Is Logan Thompson and Aiden Hill going to get it done for the Vegas Golden Knights? I mean, you look at the teams in the West getting back to the Western Conference. I mean, look, the Jets are obviously solid in goal, beyond solid in goal in Hellebuyck. The Stars are beyond solid in goal with Otten.
Well, and Riddick, Dave, Drew. Like the Hellebuyck Riddick comp, Riddick's been fine. I don't think that's been I don't think he's been a world beater, but I think that for a backup goalie, he's been fine.
Yeah, he's been fine as a backup goalie, but if you take Hellebuyck out of the Jets lineup for any extended period of time, then obviously the team is at a great disadvantage. I mean,
you can say the same thing about Jake Ottinger, right?
Yeah, you can say that absolutely. You can say the same thing about Dallas. I'm not saying that they're much different. I mean, that's why maybe Vegas, if not that Vegas is in a better position than the Jets or the Stars with their goaltending situation, because that would be crazy talk. But there's not a big difference between Logan Thompson and Aiden Hill or Laurent Brossoit if he comes back up. From the Vegas's perspective, all three goalies they're sort of plug and play. None of those goalies are in the elite or would be considered in the upper echelon. So if one's not going, you can go to the other one, and it's not going to be it shouldn't be a significant drop off. Whereas if the Jets are without Hellebuyck or the Stars are without Ottinger, well, it changes a significant makeup of their team and a significant significant aspect of how they're going to be successful.
Yeah, sure. I would agree with that. Like, I think that, when you're talking about, certain teams, there's certain teams that have a huge advantage in goal. And, we've seen that with Tampa Bay with Vasilevsky. We've seen it, the Rangers with Igor Shesterkin, right? Like, I think the Rangers are a bit of a wild card for me. Like, a lot of people are talking about the Rangers loading up because they have the cap space, right? Like, I don't know. It depends what you're talking about. Like, we talked about Patrick Kane earlier. Like, do the Rangers go after a guy like Ryan O'Reilly? Like, I have absolutely no idea. But when you're talking about, the advantage, there's not that many teams that have the advantage over the Jets when it comes to goaltending. And you're right. I think that's a huge strength for the Jets. And there are question marks for other teams, right? Like, right now, like the LA Kings, for example. Yeah. Like there's a lot of talk about the LA Kings going after a goaltender, right? Like the combination of Jonathan Quick and Cal Peterson, to me, is not a combination that I'm comfortable. I think the Kings are going to be, in the playoffs. There's no doubt that I think not no doubt, but I think there's a good chance the Kings are going to be a playoff team just based on where they are now and where they perform. But there are teams around the NHL, and that's not talked about a lot here in Winnipeg because the Jets, of course, don't have to ever worry about acquiring a goaltender at the trade deadline. But, there's serious question marks around. There's talk in Toronto. Laurent Brossoit has been linked to the Leafs as a third goalie. They've got Michael Hutchinson there, but Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov have been terrific this year. And
they haven't been as of late, though. As of late, they started off well, which is similar to what happened last year.
Yeah, but they've been good this year. They've had a good.
They've got a good team in front of them, but the last little while, I think their save percentages are close to 900, if not sub 900. But I highlighted that comment on the screen there, Dave, because I think it's from Dale Sawchuk saying we don't need to trade for a backup goaltender because no backup goaltender is going to adequately replace Connor Hellebuyck. And I think that's a good point because you've heard some chatter, especially after the Vancouver game, last weekend, that that David Riddick isn't a good enough backup. The Jets need to improve their backup goaltender position, and I don't think that's going to be something the Jets do simply because there is no goaltender out there that is going to sufficiently be able to step in for Connor Hellebuyck because Connor Hellebuyck is so far and away better than every other goaltender that he's basically in a tandem with. So, now maybe if something were to happen, between now and the deadline, and that Hellebuyck's out for the year or something, and, God forbid, obviously you don't want any player on any team to ever get injured, then maybe the Jets would have to augment the position. But right now, I don't see the Jets touching the backup goaltender situation. Maybe they try and get somebody as a third stringer because they're so young at the AHL level if we were to come to that. But other than that, I don't see the Jets doing anything regarding the backup goaltender position, Dave.
Hold on. Before you answer that, Dave, because Drew seems to think Matt Murray's been struggling. Last four starts, 970 save percentage, 944 save percentage, 929 save percentage, and he's got a 919 on the year. He's 11 wins and 4 losses.
Go back a little bit before that if we're just going to cherry pick random dates, Ezzy, because I know that's been talked
Drew,
about.
He's got a 919 save percentage and he's 11-4 on the season.
I know.
Is that good or bad?
It's very good. It's very good. No
I'm just saying you were wrong on that one.
Wow. Okay, fair enough. Dave, go on with that would be, certainly won't be the first time I'm wrong, Ezzy.
No, I mean, I don't even know I'm answering the question because, to be honest with you, like, I don't think it's on anyone's radar. I mean, Dave Rittich hasn't been fantastic. I think he's fine. He's an okay backup goaltender. If the Jets lose Connor Hellebuck, they're done. I mean, like, that's just the reality. Is the defensive structure is one thing, but it's not going to be enough to overcome the loss of number 37. So, no, I mean, in all of our evaluations and all of our thoughts, I don't think anyone is thinking about a backup goaltender for Connor Hellebuck in lieu of David Rittich, is my own personal opinion. And yeah, I mean, look, Oskari Salminen and Arvid Holm, the 2016 draft pick of the Jets, and Salminen, obviously they signed out of the Finnish Elite League. They're good, and they have their ups and downs in the AHL, and the AHL is one thing. I think, I don't know how they would do in the NHL yet. It's hard to say because obviously neither of them have played an NHL game. So we'd have to evaluate them when if and when they got that opportunity, because it's hard with goaltenders. It's hard to really, and not that I'm some goalie guru and I won't pretend to play one on this version of TV, but I think it's hard to know how a guy is going to adjust to playing at the NHL level. Oskari Salminen did have the rare two penalty shot saves in the third period against Toronto on Wednesday night. The Moose, of course, didn't finish their game last night. There was a medical emergency. I don't have an update. I haven't heard anything about the person, unfortunately. We hope that he or she is okay. But they had a medical emergency after the first period. So the game didn't resume. The game was suspended by the AHL. And so
person in the crowd, for the record, it wasn't. It was somebody in attendance at the game had a medical emergency.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, so that we don't have an update there, but that the Moose actually are back in action tonight against Belleville. They'll finish off that 6-game road trip tonight against the Senators, and they're home starting against I believe the Wolves on Tuesday night. So, come the Wolves, Ezzy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just between Ezzy and I, not just when Ezzy turns into a wolf and smacking me down. But you're right, Ezzy.
No. I wasn't smacking you down. I was just pointing out. Look, Drew, I'm not a Leafs fan, and I didn't look. Matt Murray, I had just as much of a concern about his goaltending, but and you're right. I mean, Ilya Samsonov, I was just looking at his numbers. He's struggled over the last 3 or 4 games, but I think overall it's been a strength of theirs. Like I think you thought it was going to take a step back. You look at Jack Campbell in Edmonton. Yeah. I don't think anybody's going to argue he's having a good season. So I'm just saying, the Leafs. I don't think their goaltending is top 5 in the league, but I just think it's been probably better than we expected prior to the season starting.
Sean Shapiro is going to join us at the bottom of the hour, and we'll talk to Sean about, he spent time covering the Dallas Stars, so he's familiar with Rick Bowness, and he just wrote about the Jets and Rick Bowness for EP Rinkside. That's who he now works for, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But before we do, I just wanted to touch on the Vancouver Canucks, because if there's a bigger tire fire in the entire NHL than the Vancouver Canucks, especially, it's one thing the on ice performance. But it's, on top of things, now you have Quinn Hughes saying that the organization mismanaged Tanner Pearson's hand injury, and Pearson's out for the year, and because he needs, it seemed like a relatively routine injury, to begin with. And now you got your star defenseman sniping at the organization and sniping at the training staff and the medical team. It's, from the Schadenfreude perspective and the eating popcorn gift perspective, it's really entertaining to watch, but there's no bigger organization in need of a complete and total reset from top to bottom.
Sell, Drew. They should be selling. I mean, you saw, who was it recently that wrote about it? What is it? Thomas Drance, I believe, for the Athletic.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, what do you, like, the Jets have really handled the Canucks. Like, any Jets fan that's watched those games can see how bad, especially the Canucks are defensively, right? So, like, yeah, you should have really signed Bo Horvat long-term. We know that, instead of JT Miller, but like, yeah, you should be selling. You should be big time sellers at the trade deadline. Quinn Hughes might want to be one of those players that gets moved, but yeah, I mean, this Canucks team it's amazing that, they're not going to be good next year either, right? Like, it's not like they're 1 or 2 players away from turning this around. Like, you look at like Elias Pettersson and Nils Höglander, and like, they've got a lot of talented players there. Quinn Hughes, Thatcher Demko, obviously him being injured. Their goaltending has suffered with Colin Delia and whom I mentioned, Spencer Martin, right? But you're right, Drew. The Canucks are a huge mess, and they should be, big sellers prior to the trade deadline. It remains to be seen if they will, but they should be.
They absolutely should be, but it's just even more so than the on ice performance. It's the sniping, it's the organizational chaos, Dave, that is really, it's one thing to have a bad year on the ice, it's or to be struggling on the ice, but it just seems like there's no trust and there's no when do you ever hear a player criticize the medical staff? I mean, it doesn't happen very often. I mean, we here in Winnipeg, there was the Dustin Byfuglien situation with the ankle, but that doesn't even seem to be nearly as bad as things have gotten in Vancouver.
To your point, Drew, you didn't hear players talking about Buff's injury.
Right.
Like, it was covered extensively by the media, but you're right. Players commenting about other players' mishandling of their medical situation it's bizarre.
Well, when Quinn Hughes comes out and says that and his words were mismanaged, when that is just like, here's the
whole situation, Drew. I mean, I don't think you have to delve too deep into it. I think it comes down to Vancouver is a tire fire, and it goes with. I mean, look at all the stuff with the assistant general managers there, hiring them and firing them, and putting out statements, and Rutherford putting out statements, and it like honestly. You know what it smacks of? Too many cooks in the kitchen. It really does. It sounds like sounds like it's, and the other thing is it's a bunch of people who are all pulling in their own directions and not pulling together as a team. That's what it seems like. And again, I don't pay 1 second of attention to the Canucks outside of when the Jets are playing them or the Moose are playing the Abbotsford Canucks. So I don't necessarily pay a lot of attention to those organizations. But I mean, yes, you can't help but hear statements from a player of that nature and think, what the hell is going on in Vancouver? They're lucky it's a beautiful city and they've got lots to do there because right now the hockey team is flailing about and not having any success. And that's got to be tough because Vancouver's already had enough lean years. They kind of thought things were turning around there with all the kind of success they had with all the drafting. Mm-hmm. And now, with JT Miller, I mean, we saw what he did and his kind of apathy and keeping him over Horvat. I mean, it's just a lot of big question marks, and it seems like there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of the fans. And we look, when we talked to Kevin Woodley, what was it, 2 weeks ago, that's kind of what he talked about. He talked about the fans' apathy and the fans not showing up to games and not having huge crowds based on the fact that they're not happy with the direction of this club. So it seems like on and off the ice, things are going poorly in Vancouver.
No question about it. Sean Shapiro of EP Rinkside up next to talk about the Jets and all around the NHL. Don't go anywhere. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show rolls on this Saturday morning.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Bottom of hour number 2. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. And we're thrilled to welcome to the program from EP Rinkside, the associate editor, Sean Shapiro, joins us on the show. Sean, good morning. Nice to see you. How are things?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
We're doing fine and dandy. Sean, always appreciate your time, and we appreciate you joining us.
Sean, we had to go back to Michigan. The Jets were just in Michigan, but we love Michigan so much. Dave used to go to school there. It's a great state, so we needed to bring you on just because, we needed a little bit more Michigan content.
Oh, perfect. Always a good way.
Sean, obviously you spent a lot of time over the last little while, in previous years, working for the Dallas Stars, covering the Dallas Stars for The Athletic, which means you spend a lot of time with Rick Bowness. And you recently wrote about the Jets and Rick Bowness and Kyle Connor for EP Rinkside. Maybe for our audience members who haven't had an opportunity to read that great article, and we do recommend that they do, we'll tweet it out on our Twitter feed at Illegal Curve. What was your main takeaways from your conversation with Rick Bowness and regarding the Winnipeg Jets?
Yeah, one of the big things that I was curious of, kind of looking from afar at Winnipeg, coming into working on this story. Obviously, I covered the Stars during that 2019-20 season when Dallas went through the sudden coaching change and Rick took over. And one of the things that team went all the way to the Cup final in the bubble, obviously an incredibly weird season all the way around, all over the place. And just looking from afar, I kind of wondered what type of impact Rick was having as far as coming in and just personality-wise. Like, one of the things that stood out from his time in Dallas was players always told me how much Rick helped stabilize things. And when things are kind of up and down, left and right, everything like that, he helps bring everything back to an even level. And I was kind of curious if that's what was happening in Winnipeg. And it's one thing, obviously, to hear that from the coach himself. It's another thing, too. That's why I was curious to ask Kyle. I asked a couple other players in passing, too, at that morning skate as well. To me, just to kind of, I saw a lot of those parallels, and that's why I wanted to write about it. I wanted to kind of write the perspective of, okay, Rick Bowness comes in, and as much as Rick Bowness can be coaches are hockey people and systems people or X and O's people, so much of what makes Rick Bowness an effective coach is the way he handles the human beings, the way he manages guys on the day-to-day, the way he understands kind of their life circumstance. And that was something I kind of wanted to highlight. And I think Kyle did a good job of giving me the right quote to kind of help tell the story as well. And just kind of talking to Rick a little bit more, you still get a bit of that feeling. Like, Rick's a guy, as a player, you can't help but not want to play for him. He's a guy who you respect him because he respects you. And I think we saw that a lot in Dallas. And you guys being in Winnipeg maybe know more than I, but just even talking to him, obviously the Jets went through a bit of that, like the big public blow up. Everyone's throwing darts from everywhere about the captaincy change. And one of the things personally to me that stood out so nice about it was, like, not nice about the reaction, but like when I've talked to Rick about it, Rick has been like, yeah, we needed to do something like this. I went to the guys about it. I was honest with the guys about it, and Rick took ownership for it. It wasn't something where he tried to trample people in addition to what else was being happened kind of outside of the Jets locker room and sphere and everything like that. So I think Rick is the way where the Jets are in the standings, what they've done. So much I give a lot of credit to Rick and what he's done, and just kind of being able to come in and set a culture and kind of respect the players give the players the respect so they respect him back, if that makes sense.
Well, let me follow up on that, Sean. So a lot of the media are coming out with the halfway mark awards and things of that nature. And NHL.com came out with their list of the Jack Adams nominees, and Rick Bowness was not among the top candidates there. Do you think that maybe for whatever reason, I don't know if it's Winnipeg being a smaller market, which we readily admit, do you think he's maybe not getting the credit that he deserves for the job that he's doing so far this year in Winnipeg?
I think so. I really think so. If we were going through, and I don't know if it's out yet, but we were doing our own kind of internal thing with that over at EP Rinkside the other day, and looking at our ballots so far, his name was definitely always popping up in the first 2-3 names as people were talking. Like he should be. You talk about kind of coach of the year, and you talk about where the Jets were last season. You look at where they were in the standings, and it, even as they've even said, it's pretty much, there's obviously a couple tweaks here and there, but it's pretty much the same personnel. It's mostly the same roster. And with what Rick's done to kind of help calm down both the outside storm of, hey, how's the Jets culture, all that stuff, and then also help kind of solidify things. And he has a world-class goalie. He's going to lean on him, but at the same time, make his world-class goalie's life a little bit easier at the same time. Like, to me, he should be in that conversation for the Jack Adams. I think the one issue that always kind of pops up is it's fun. I think the national discourse for the Jack Adams sometimes becomes too often of, well, we got a guy who's a newer, younger coach who is like newer, younger, or was away for a bit, and like so Rick never left. And I think if Rick had kind of not gone from the Dallas job to the Winnipeg job, people would be like, oh, well, look, where this came back and reinvented himself or something like that. I think people like that narrative that Rick doesn't bring because he just went from one job to another. Whereas the other ones, like, for example, the guy who I covered super well in Dallas and obviously in Boston, like, nothing against what Jim Montgomery's done in Boston, but we're talking about an extremely good Boston team that if they weren't in that spot, it would be more of a story than if it would be even more of a story. So
right.
Yeah, and I think we kind of laugh, here in Winnipeg, like nobody's talking about Barry Trotz, Sean, right? Like there were a lot of disappointed Jets fans when Barry announced that he wasn't going to be coaching this year, but now you don't hear a lot of talk about him. Not that the Jets fans wouldn't welcome him as a head coach at some point, but Rick Bowness has turned the Jets' fortunes around so quickly because it's not like the Jets are just playing some good hockey as of late, right? Like they've been at near the top of the standings with Dallas. I wanted to just ask you about Detroit because I'm sure we're going to get it back into the Jets and some other teams here. But, you look at the Red Wings and, it was fully on display, the offensive, ability that they have, even though that game might have been the most chaotic hockey game I've ever seen with all of the goals. But I wanted to ask you about the job that you believe Derek Lalonde has done this year, because I think you'd agree, bringing in Andrew Kopp, bringing in David Perron, Ben Sherratt. I mean, this team clearly wanted to make the playoffs this year, even though they knew it was going to be tough in the division. But how do you think he has done with this group, and how would you say the Red Wings have done with the expectations? Because obviously the expectations for this team haven't been this high in quite some time.
Yeah, and I think the expectation for this season, I think really the playoff expectation is actually next year. I think this year the whole conversation is you want to be in that. Now, if they were in the playoffs, I'd obviously be thrilled this year. But I think kind of the more realistic expectation this year was kind of trying to be in that 9 through 12 spot in the East. You learn a lot about, so you have guys like Moritz Seider take another step. You figure out some of the other young guys, and then you're really in that spot to compete in a very tough East next year. I think part shit is the division. If the Wings were in the West, I think there's actually a chance they're a playoff team this year. But just because of where they are.
I keep saying that, Sean, by the way. I keep saying that for me, like the Eastern Conference is just so much better than the West this year.
Oh, yeah. And so, Detroit would be, for my money, they would be in that playoff conversation if they were in the West. And so I think that's, it's allowed kind of to slightly temper the expectations and raise them at the same time in a weird way. And one of my biggest takeaways about what Derek Lalonde has been is actually comes off that Winnipeg game. They win that game 7-5, wild, crazy game. The team scores 7 goals, and he talks about being maybe their worst game of the year. And the fact that he's able to, I think he's done a great job kind of setting expectations and creating a baseline that Detroit kind of lacked the last couple of years of, obviously and this is going to sound like the overly hockey coach cliche thing, but it actually is a bit true here. There is such an importance to building that process, building that environment, building the way they're going to play on a nightly basis, that I think Detroit is starting to get there. And the fact he can take that from the Winnipeg game, and they go and they play, by his words, a messy game, and they win 7-5. They go and they play Toronto 2 nights ago, and it's a solid defensive game. You look at a game, and even with the Toronto team that was missing Matthews, they really didn't let up much at all. Like, I think that to me just kind of is a nice microcosm of what Lalonde has done, where you can take and adjust and fix the why and the how, even no matter whether it was a win or loss at the end. And that to me is going to really build towards, when we look at Detroit as a playoff team for next year, I think these are the type of things we'll look back on and kind of see.
Sean Shapiro is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms. Sean is the associate editor with EP Rinkside.
Sean, I want to ask you a Jets-related question, but I think the bigger question is the fascination that your tweet got with respect to the cellophane that media have to put on before they enter the Jets room. And I will attest, because I, of course, gone into the Jets room, and I can tell you that taking that cellophane off your shoes after the fact is not an easy thing. But I got to tell you, like, I was funny because I read your tweet and I was enjoying it, but then I actually tried to read through the tweet, some of the comments in response, and I was like, dear God, are people actually responding in this real way? Then I realized it was Twitter. But I mean, that was hilarious, the reaction that your tweet elicited.
Yeah, I was, to be honest, I mean, it's a silly thing, right? Like, when you look at it from the outside, like when you see the equipment guys set it up and it's not part of your normal routine. And like, I'm down here still at the rink right now for the Wings play Columbus tonight, and we'll go into the Columbus locker room and you don't have to step on the cellophane thing and everything like that. So, but when the equipment guy lines it up and you have no idea what it is at first, you're like, this is kind of, and then you see like Ken Weeb and all the broadcast guys, and they're lining up ready to, and it was just kind of a funny thing. And I had if they're going to provide it and everything like that, I wasn't the person complaining about it. It's just kind of this is something I'm seeing at the rink I've never seen before. And it's Twitter, so there's a lot of reactions and pats that went down that I won't discuss. But the one that I enjoyed, I really enjoyed how New York Jets fans picked up and thought this was a real thing, and all of a sudden it became. I started getting all of these discussions about, did the Giants do this? I started seeing questions about. I started getting the NFL kind of fan base picked up on it, crossover, not even realize where they were going. So it's just a wacky thing. I mean, it's kind of funny to see. And I thought it's something as simple as, I didn't expect it to blow up like that. I thought it'd be a couple people see it, think this is funny, but then all of a sudden I went home, had lunch, didn't look at the phone. I go pick it up and you're like, whoa. So,
let me tell you, it makes sense when you spend any time in Winnipeg and you realize all the salt that you track into the room and what it can do to skate blades and that sort of thing, and the amount of work that the equipment staff have to do to clean it up after the fact.
Well, I moved, so it's funny, like people who haven't lived in north of in a more northern climate. Like, so when I moved from Dallas back up to Michigan, my father-in-law, who was much smarter about cars than I am, like, I have an older car that he's like, well, you should sell it right now because it has no salt damage on it right now. It's like, you have a car with this many miles on it with no salt, someone's going to wonder where you got it. So
it's like the Manitoba versus Ontario debate, right? Apparently Ontario uses more of the salt, where we use the sand in Manitoba. I mean, regardless, my car is still going to be a 2013 Nissan. That's not changing. It's not going to be a Lamborghini. But I guess it's nicer to have sand on the streets.
Well, talking about, again, we're really going on a tangent here, and I apologize for that, Sean. But when I was in Kentucky a few weeks ago, they couldn't. Normally, they just use salt, but it was so cold that they couldn't use salt on the roads because it just didn't have any impact. It only has an impact, when it's warm enough that it's going to melt everything. So the interstate, was absolute just ice because the salt didn't do it wasn't able to help at all. So it made for our drive to be a lot more more difficult because they don't use sand like we do here.
Yeah.
Total tangent, Sean.
Sean, do you have your winter tires on? Are you a winter tire guy?
I don't have. We don't get it in Michigan.
You don't get it bad enough.
Yeah, we don't get it bad enough. We get the spot where it's like it'll kind of just it'll get cold for a day or so, really cold for a day or so, but then it'll randomly warm up for a day. It doesn't have the solid. We don't get the solid base that sticks.
Well, I'll try and rein it back in, somewhat hockey related, but I couldn't let that. I couldn't pass that up, Sean, because it really was entertaining to me and to quite a few other people. And like you said, it had crossover power to get into the NFL talk as well. So
you're an influencer, Sean.
Yes,
there you go. But no, the one thing I'm curious about is the impact the Jets are having, and you talked about it a little bit, obviously, with respect to Rick Bowness, and I know you talked to Kyle Connor, but it is interesting to me because I was reading an ESPN article talking about the Norris. And, we here in Winnipeg are focused, obviously, on Josh Morrissey and what he's been able to do and having the season he's having. But it doesn't seem like a lot of people outside of this market, obviously a little bit somewhat, but not really having the impact. So what is it about smaller markets just not having that impact? Because you'd think that it would be there would be an awareness. And then you read articles in the national press and it's like, well, there's no he's not even, I think when the ESPN did their poll, I think Josh Morrissey was like similar to Rick Bowness. It was like maybe 5th or 6th down the line of the Norris Trophy. And look, I know that a lot of these guys don't care about individual awards. They'd rather all win the Stanley Cup collectively. But it is notable to think that there are guys who are having significant impacts on their team, and yet they're not really part of a national discussion in a National Hockey League.
Yeah, I think there's there's a couple levels to it. I think and this is just an unfortunate reality of I think how people vote on things it's not as scientific as it should be. I think too many times it becomes people really go through and this actually doesn't excuse Morrissey not being included on there because if you were just scanning points, you would include Morrissey. But I think a lot of the times it becomes you look at how narratives are built around certain teams that kind of carry through the season for better or worse. I think it's a lot of if you have anyone up there who follows college football, it's a lot of the reasons where sometimes you see the flaws with the college football season where we don't really get these proper rankings probably because we have a top 25 poll before anyone plays a single game.
Texas A&M.
Yes, and so I think there's kind of part of that included, and I think the other part of it too, and I think it's kind of where two things kind of work against each other a little bit sometimes, I think, with the narrative where Winnipeg gets credit, Rick gets a lot of credit for coming in and bringing more structure, bringing a little bit more structure in there, playing in there. And I think that cuts into some people look at the entire team's doing it. So it's not as much of a Josh Morrissey thing. But then I think at the same time, what Josh is doing, they kind of hold that against Rick. I think it's almost a space where it's like, you find a way to argue against each other at the same time when you're looking when you kind of look at Winnipeg, and I think that's kind of an unfortunate kind of reality of how it plays out. It's also at least the thing that's kind of I was talking about some of this the other day. The other interesting thing is at least there's a space where Winnipeg at least has the media guys in place to kind of fight for their guys. If I would say, I was looking at the season New Jersey's having right now, and I believe it's a team where it's a market where aside from the one paper, there's not really anyone covering that team. And as good as someone should be banging the drum much harder for the Hughes, and he's not going to win the Hart, but what Hughes is doing there should be more of a media push from someone actually covering that team on a daily basis. And I think at least Winnipeg still has that, as opposed to where there are some other places where honestly it's going to take you look at a Carolina or something like that, where Carolina, I think they're very in vogue right now because it took a couple years where there's guys there should have gotten attention a couple years ago, but never really did because of the lack of where they stand in their own market.
Sean Shapiro is the associate editor for EP Rinkside. Sean, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your insight. We'll get together real soon to continue this conversation. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy this evening's Red Wings Blue Jackets game. You never know when the Blue Jackets are going to show up. They pumped the Jets in Winnipeg earlier this year. So, maybe you'll see the good version of the Blue Jackets tonight because they haven't had very many nights like that so far this season.
Should also mention before we let you go, Sean, that people should be checking out snapshots. And the other thing I was going to ask you about was I saw that you recently launched Daily Fadeaway. So for sports fans that are listening, can you just kind of briefly introduce that, because that's an exciting new project that I know that you have.
Obviously, it's a couple. I've been playing around with figuring out the new media world myself after a change in job locales a couple months back. But
you can relate to that, Sean.
Yes, but the addition to the EP Rink side, I've got to doing my own Substack, where it's basically I kind of call it my own sandbox to play around with things. Where whether it's obviously I still have some Stars poll and readership, do some things there, do some things with the Red Wings, and play around with just kind of basically write about things that interest me. And then also, if you're won't apply as much to your Winnipeg listener, but if you are a Dallas Cowboys fan or whatever, like I'm working on actually a project called the Daily Fadeaway. My partner on that is actually former Stars goalie coach Mike Valley. He and I are playing around with this space where just kind of the 5-minute Apple News style newsletter for just Dallas sports, where you get it in your inbox. It's everything you need to know about the 4 major teams in 5 minutes. We also did some stuff with TCU football as well, and just kind of playing around in the new media world and figuring out what works, what doesn't, and hoping to stay relevant.
There's a lot of Cowboys fans, as you know. Cowboys fans are everywhere. There's a lot of Cowboys fans here in Winnipeg. I have a really good friend, Rich Duncan, who's a big Cowboys fan. So check out Daily Fadeaway.
And the TCU went well up until the national title game, but the semifinal game was entertaining as hell.
Up until the up until the amount of time they kicked off against Georgia. It was a great season.
Yeah, that's right. Sean, thank you. Appreciate this. Take care. All the best to you.
Thanks a lot, guys.
There you go. Sean Shapiro joining us here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Great interview with Sean. Always great to catch up with him and see what quality people and the interesting things that they are doing. Winnipeg Jets next in action tomorrow evening, as you're well aware, against the Arizona Coyotes. It'll be a 6:00 puck drop in downtown Winnipeg, just the one-off before they head back out on the road for the 5 games post-game show tomorrow night, 8:45 back here on the Illegal Curve YouTube channel. I believe, Ezra, you're taking tomorrow night off, if I'm not mistaken, and so Dave and I will be handling the reins to continue the horse talk. I got all the puns today. I'm just firing with the puns. That is a picture of Dave's horse, or at least the ass of the horse.
What's the name?
I can't see. You're too close.
Where's the ass of the horse, Dave?
There's too much of a light. There's a glare going on. What is it?
Well, Snakes and Ladders.
Is that Sneaky Pete?
No, Snakes and Ladders.
I thought it was Waggles.
Oh, hold on. Speaking of Waggles, Ezzy, funny you should mention that. Waggles, right there.
By the way, Drew, does Dave keep those pictures like in his pocket?
You spell Waggles with 1 G?
Well, I didn't spell Waggles. We picked up Waggles, so there you go. And then hold on, the first
because that would I agree with Drew. Wouldn't that be Waggles?
Or Waggles?
Yeah,
no, it was Waggles.
Yeah,
but with 1 G though, right?
Yeah, almost won older horse of the year until our jockey screwed us. I was so pissed. Still mad about that.
Take a Sharpie, Dave, and get another G in there.
I sometimes will watch back and watch that race. We had it won. We were going to win older horse of the year. It was going to be, I think, the fourth. I think it was a miler. It was a long distance one. This horse had it in the bag, and the jockey's like, I go, why'd you go wide? Had no reason to go wide. Took it, had the inside rail. It was perfect. It was running beautifully. Around the final turn, takes the horse wide, gets beat, finishes third. We don't win older horse of the year. I was pissed. I was not happy. Still burns me.
Hang on. Did you actually ask the jockey?
Oh yeah, I went up. Oh yeah.
Oh really?
For sure.
Interesting. So you're criticizing the jockey. It
was the dumbest thing I've ever. I'm still burned by it. It was the dumbest. There was no reason. I'll tell you why he did it.
You think he was on the take?
Well, I think that he may have had who knows. I'm not going to cast aspersions any more than I just did.
Bold accusation.
It made no sense, Drew. It made no sense. It made no sense to do what
Dave is alleging corruption when it came to the horse race for the older horse of the year.
That's right.
This is
was the horse in on it, Dave? Do you think did the horse know that the fix was in?
2011. I'm still burned by it.
Did you send the horse to the glue factory, or did you send the jockey to the glue factory? Both have gone to the glue factory. Oh my gosh, things are getting heated when it comes to
Kim's saying I can afford parking if I can afford a horse. Just so you know, Kim, the Kivas family were the true owners of the horse. The Minuk family were, like I said, they were nice enough and gracious enough to allow us to call ourselves the owners of the horse.
And we should mention too, Dave, that everyone should download the Grid Horse app.
Yes.
Park your horse with exclusive Grid Horse parking spots throughout downtown. $5.
I did go very upset, and his mother was a mutter, to answer Art Cooper's comment.
If we're going to have a conversation about horses on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, we have to bring up Drew's wedding, Kentucky, Keeneland Racetrack, which is a
the bird
beautiful
pooing
racetrack.
on the rock.
Yeah, we have to mention that we all put some money down on a horse race, and it was raining, and our friend Neil was pooped on by a bird, and then we ended up winning the race. So we have to bring that up.
Good luck, of course. I got married on a Sunday in Kentucky. And then the Saturday morning, we all went to Keeneland Racetrack. It was just before the Kentucky Derby. The Kentucky Derby was the week after, so it was right between or maybe like 2 weeks after. It was right after the Bluegrass Stakes.
Juleps.
We were drinking. There was certainly some alcohol being consumed. So the last big race in lead up to the Kentucky Derby happens in Lexington. That's where I got married. It happens at Keeneland Racetrack. It's called the Bluegrass Stakes. That's the last, as I said, the big training race before the Kentucky Derby. So that was the week before. Then we were there the week after that, and it was a little bit of a gray Saturday morning, but we did win the race, and our friend got pooped on, and really that's a win-win for everybody involved at that point.
I once actually I had a Beaver Canoe shirt. I was in Canada's Wonderland in Toronto as a kid with my family, and I got my Beaver Canoe shirt got pooped on by a seagle.
What does that have to do with horses, though?
Well, it doesn't, but you just said Neil got pooped on.
It has to do with excrement.
Yeah. Yeah.
All righty. The Illegal Curve post-game show comes your way tomorrow night at 8:45 p.m. This has been a very fun edition.
Hey, Drew, no offense.
Let's go back to the snakes, Drew.
You started this derail train, so Ezzy and I can only jump on that and go wherever we so choose after you're the one who chooses to take us slightly askew, if you will.
I did definitely start it off with a little bit of a random tangent, and it's only gone more random since then. But it was fun nonetheless. And we want to say a big thank you, of course, to Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press and to Sean Shapiro of EP.
By the way, that's the Winnipeg Jeff Hamilton, not the Ottawa Jeff Hamilton.
That's right, exactly. That's a different Jeff Hamilton than whatever the hell Dave was rambling on about there before.
He did go to Carleton University, so I mean, he was in Ottawa at some point.
Yeah, well, that's like saying I'm from Ottawa and I lived there for 2 years. I'm not from Ottawa. I just happened to live there for a couple of years.
Yeah, but Jeff also has family there. I think it was my confusion. Did he answer you as where I was?
Yes, I also have family
there too. Your
There's lots of
Ginsburgs
Ginsburgs in Ottawa. That's where my late grandfather is from. So again, I'm sorry, Dave. I'm with you 99.9% of the time, but on this one, I'm going to have to join Drew in saying that the Jeff Hamilton from Ottawa thing is just never existed.
All right, well, whatever. Sometimes, usually we try and state strict facts on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Yeah. Every once in a while, we deviate and we tell an untruth, and evidently that was my untruth. And if that's the extent of my untruths on the show, I'm okay.
Stay tuned for tomorrow's post-game show where we play two truths and a lie, Dave and I, in advance of the Jets and Coyotes game. Big thank you to all the sponsors of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Kids were at Rumors, Drew, the other night. I had a great time.
That's terrific.
Throw up to the Soch.
There you go. Glad to hear it. Tons, great week at Rumors, and of course, a great week upcoming at Rumors. Mike Cronin is going to be in town. Sold out shows.
No relation to Sean.
This weekend. No relationship to Sean. A great weekend, all weekend with sold out shows for Sugar Sammy. Big thanks to everybody who makes the Saturday show, the post-game show, the website a possibility. Our friends, of course, at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, Grid Park, and The Keg support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. If you haven't already done so, smash the like button on our YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast, leave us feedback on the YouTube channel, leave us feedback on the Apple iTunes page. You get entries into the Illegal Curve merchandise, into the merchandise contest for doing all those fine things. We'll be back tomorrow night, 8:45 for the Illegal Curve post-game show. For Dave Manouk, for Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mandel. If it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.